If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read the newspaper, you're misinformed. So said Mark Twain, and today we are going to prove that that's kind of the case here. So hello everyone, this is Dr. Chris Martinson here with your update on SARS-CoV-2, aka the honey badger virus, for August 13th, 2020. Today we're fighting the mainstream press today. It just needs to be done, and it's unfortunate that we have so much miscommunication and misinformation. It's just a mess out there. I feel like I should apologize for something I shouldn't even apologize for, which is the state of the mess of the information that's out there right now. Look, I know this is a novel virus, and we're learning as we go, but there are some seriously misguided, misinformed attempts out there to muddy the waters and do things for really reasons that have no basis in a pandemic. Some of them are political in nature. Some of them have to do with money. Some of them have to do with people having treasured belief systems that prevent them from seeing things the appropriate way or allowing new data to inform who they are. Well, those of you who are listening to this and still listening to this channel, I think you're here for the same reason that I produce these things. You care about what's going on in the world. You're curious. You like to look at what the known information is so that you can make decisions about your life that will help inform the decisions you make so that you can make better decisions, or simply because you know that this is critical time. So everything counts right now. This is a critical time. Decisions really matter now. So, all right, where are we at in this? I'm not even going to review the numbers today. Right into it. Fighting the mainstream press, CNN edition. This just came out today. And it just caught me. I put aside all the other research I'd done. I said, we just got to talk about this because this is just ridiculous here. So headline, CDC issues dire warning for the fall if coronavirus measures are not followed. I'm going to laugh because that's kind of rich because, the CDC was hemming and hawing and waffling and was out there with literally, it's just the flu, bro. Don't wear masks kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden they got dire warnings if certain measures are not followed. Okay, well, let's see what's going on here. Let's unpack this and see what we got. Start here. A top federal health official is issuing a dire warning follow recommended coronavirus measures or risk having the worst fall in U.S. public health history. So, first up, that's got a really interesting assumption baked into it, which is that the coronavirus is going to follow a seasonal pattern. Now, we don't have any data to suggest it will. We've all heard about the pandemic waves that happened in the Spanish flu in 1918. There was wave 1 in the spring, wave 2 in the fall, and then wave 3 in the following spring, and each of those waves was horrible. So the idea here is that we'll have another wave. The problem is that the Spanish flu was an HN series influenza virus, which is a very different beast from a coronavirus. So I don't know that we can make that presumption that we're going to have a fall outbreak. We could, but it's not something that we can be certain about at this stage. Why? Well, first up, what we've seen in pretty much every country we look at is that there is a pretty bad first wave, then the non-pharmaceutical interventions, things like mask wearing, social distancing, hand washing, all that. Those take over, as well as, maybe some sort of T-cell immunity and seroprevalence combined to with the NPIs to make the first wave die away. And by the way, that happens in country after country after country, whether it's got a cool temperature, a warm temperature, dry, humid, all that stuff, right? So there's not a lot of data right now in the country level data to suggest that you can say that there's going to be a seasonal aspect to this because this virus does better in a colder climate, except the meat packing plants, which is a cool, moist environment. That place, those places really seem to be exceptionally good at spreading the virus. So, except for ignoring the country level data, just looking at the meat packing plants, I could say, yeah, okay, that is a better environment for spreading this thing. But those people are working long hours, many cases shoulder to shoulder, and all of that. All right, continuing on. Let's just skip over this part right here. It says, quote, for your country right now and the war that we're in against COVID, I'm asking you to do 4 simple things. Wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands, and be smart about crowds, said Dr. Robert Redfield, director of the CDC. I'm not asking some of America to do it. We all got to do it. Without following the recommendations, this could be the worst fall from a public health perspective we've ever had. Okay, that would, I guess, be worse than the fall of 2019 there, or 2018. I'm sorry, 1918 for the Spanish flu. That was a pretty bad fall. Okay, here's where this is where I'm just going to take the mainstream press to task. So interesting quotes. How about some context on those quotes? How about we say, is there anything else Dr. Redfield's ever said? Maybe we should ask a follow-up question. Is there any chance anybody reading this could be confused by any of these statements? Because, confusion is a stone-cold killer in a pandemic. You want to have clear, consistent, transparent communications. I think there's a little room for confusion here from Dr. Redfield because it doesn't take me much digging. Of course, I don't have a big, giant research budget. You're talking to a guy on a farm in Western Massachusetts with an $89 a month Comcast connection. All right. Look at this. Dr. Robert Redfield right here from February 5th. CDC does not currently recommend the use of face masks to help prevent the novel coronavirus. 2019 nCoV is not spreading in communities in the U.S. Take everyday preventive actions to help slow the spread of respiratory illness. That's just what they were saying in February. And of course, we were saying very different things weeks earlier than that here on this program. But even looking, I think this comes to us from, this was in March sometime. Let's just listen in on this one if we can. Let's see what we got here.
People be afraid. Thank you. Could you turn on your microphone? Should people engage in regular hand washing and coughing into their sleeves?
Absolutely.
Should people be stocking up on cleaning supplies?
No.
Should people be stocking up on prescription medications that they have?
Not at this time.
Should people be stocking up on food supply?
Not at this time.
Should you wear a mask if you're healthy?
No.
All right, there you have it. It keeps on like that. So Dr. Redfield being very, very dismissive to a congresswoman there who was asking some very direct questions, very timely questions that I think all would be answered differently today by Dr. Redfield, but they could have been answered differently back then. So, hey, guess what, CNN? Here's a little journalistic tip for you. If you're trying to present Dr. Redfield here as the authority that we should listen to, you have to account for the fact that this guy bobbled the ball very, very badly earlier on in this story. You have to provide that context because otherwise you're counting on the fact that your readers either have no context because they forgot to read the newspapers back in February or March or April or May, or you're counting on them having forgotten any of that stuff. And you can't do that. There's confusion out there. It's legit, okay? And for obvious reasons. All right, carrying on. Here's how that same article continues. This is the same article in CNN from today. Anti-vaxxers ramp up conspiracy theories. Oh, that's a loaded combination of things there. Anti-vaxxers is a loaded statement right now, as if they are a singular group. And of course, they are ramping up conspiracy theories. This is to help denigrate them. This is two emotionally laden terms in a row. Check this out. On coronavirus vaccines, Redfield is cautiously optimistic that one or more vaccines will be ready by the start of 2021. Again, why is he an expert that we're leaning on? You're going to have to redo his creds here, CNN. Sorry about that. But, excuse me again, anti-vaxxers have taken to social media to spread lies about the future coronavirus vaccine. Some include claims it contains monkey brains or it's a CIA plot to take over the world. Others allege the vaccine will include an invisible, trackable tattoo, or it will disfigure those who take it. As the lies spread, the government's multi-billion-dollar vaccine effort has yet to come up with a public education campaign to counteract the propaganda. Well, what is it? Is it lies or is it propaganda or is it both or is it conspiracy theories? That's a really packed set right there. That's just, I'm going to laugh. This is laughable. Oh my God, CNN, what the hell is wrong with you? Get out of here. So this is basically saying anybody who has any questions about this vaccine is either a complete nut, spreading lies about that is containing monkey brains or invisible trackable tattoos, or they are just conspiracy theorists, or they're just propaganda. Let's rewind here just a tiny bit. Take a deep breath, CNN. Hold on. Hey, look here. Vaccine safety is a legitimate concern. All caps on the is right there. Here's one from Nature, the preeminent journal in the world from just in March. Don't rush to deploy COVID-19 vaccines and drugs without sufficient safety guarantees. Safety always must comes first here, they say. Oh, how about this from Reuters? As pressure for coronavirus vaccine mounts, scientists debate risks of accelerated testing. Here's one from the AAMC, which speaks for hundreds of thousands of doctors and nurses and other practitioners. Here's why we can't rush a COVID-19 vaccine. CNBC says safety concerns over vaccine for coronavirus still remain. Quoting an expert. Or carrying on, here's another one. Speed coronavirus vaccine testing by deliberately infecting volunteers? Not so fast, some scientists warn. And the biggie for me here, coming just from June, here in a research paper saying, out of the frying pan into the fire, due diligence warranted for ADE in COVID-19, and that's antibody-dependent enhancement, ADE. It's a very serious concern, and it's something you might miss if you skipped safety testing. That's legit. These are all absolutely 100% legit things, and there's a lot of experts that say you don't want to rush the safety side of this whole thing. The only thing that CNN led with here, the only thing was that the only reason you could be against a vaccine is because you are a conspiracy theory, lie-spreading propaganda machine of a human being who thinks about monkey brains and trackable tattoos. Okay, once you see that, it's actually CNN that's actually promoting the propaganda here. All right, because propaganda is when you use emotionally laden terms to try and enforce a particular political outcome. So here you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to just shove everybody into a box, into a corner, and say, if you are against these vaccines that we would like to have everybody taking, then the problem is that you are a conspiracy theorist and all of that, when in truth, there's room in here for people to have legit safety concerns. I will tell you this. When it comes to, in particular, these new mRNA vaccines where we have 0 of these things on the market, I am not going to be the first person lining up to get one of those. Not because I'm a weird anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist, none of that stuff. Believe me, I got plenty of vaccines in my body, but this new one, where they rush the safety testing, and it's a brand new thing that we have no experience with, no thank you. That's a legit concern, right? Or I'm going to want to see really, really massive phase 3 trials where I can trust the data that comes out of those and believe that they've actually run a fair trial and they didn't just hide the bad data and do all that other stuff. All right, carrying on. Same CNN article, Dr. Tina Hartert of the Vanderbilt University Medical Center said lack of faith in the vaccine can lead to major outbreaks. She described the government's communication on the vaccine as crucial. We should have started on this months ago, but it's never too late to start this important messaging, because otherwise the messaging people will listen to is the story of one child from another parent. So she's talking, well, people are just going to believe these anecdotes. Like, oh my God, I heard about this person whose child got sick from this vaccine. And she's saying, well, to counteract that, you need clear, consistent, transparent communication. And you do. You absolutely do. And that's why we put that as a centerpiece on our gold standard pandemic approach. Clear, consistent, transparent, frequent, and timely communication. Now, the problem here that they don't even recognize, that CNN just sort of glosses over, is that when they're trying to resurrect Dr. Redfield as an expert, they need to also address the fact that he was an anti-expert earlier on. Bad stuff in these events right here. And that's a problem because what you need that clear, consistent, transparent, frequent, timely communication. And by the way, it doesn't help to come out and say the only reason you could be against this new vaccine is because you're a nutcase, right? That doesn't help either, because there's a lot of legit concern about this thing, and safety concerns are very real, because the balancing act in a vaccine is you would like it to do more harm than good. Now, believe me, I think this coronavirus is a bad actor. This honey badger will tear you up if it gets in there, and you're one of the susceptible people. Again, we still don't know why. Some are, some aren't. But for the people who are, even in the mild cases we now know, many people end up with it's a long haul sort of an experience with it, but what appears to be long-lasting, if not permanent damage in many cases. So yes, you have to balance out how bad the honey badger virus is on one hand, And then you have to balance out what the risks are of this vaccine are on the other hand. And by the way, the punchline in this one is this piece right here. If it turns out that antibody-dependent enhancement is a thing, and by the way, that's what you would surface in a safety trial, like a big, fat phase 3 safety efficacy trial. If ADE is a thing, it will turn out that people who are getting the vaccine will then, in a future date, be at risk of an even worse event. If that's a thing. That's not saying it is a thing, but I'm not saying it's not a thing. How? Why? Because we don't have any data on that yet. We just know that it was a thing with SARS, classic SARS, the original SARS back in 2003. ADE was a thing in some of the vaccine trials that they ran forward with there. So that's why I think, yes, Tina's right. Dr. Hartert is right. You do need clear, consistent communication, and it's never too late to start that stuff. And the messaging would be also truthful. It would say, here's what we're trying to do, and we are cutting some corners on this vaccine. We're rushing it through. We think on balance that's going to be good. There are some risks in here. Here's what we think that we know that they are. Here's how we're going to track to make sure that we detect these risks so that if they are worse than we think, we will pull this vaccine and we'll go down a different route. We have 5 of them that we're trying out right now. If one of them turns out to be better than the others, we'll use that. If it then turns out to be worse than the others, we'll pull it and swap it. But to say that there's only one appropriate approach, and that's to just trust the government and trust the first vaccine that comes out, is absolutely unwarranted at this case without first giving us the data that we need. And they're not doing that yet. And by the way, continuing on with this, this was Dr. Tina Hatcher read this already. This part here, I found this interesting too, which is you can't run away from the numbers. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the NIAID, said during a National Geographic panel on Thursday, you can't run away from the numbers of people who've died, the number of people getting hospitalized, the surges that we're seeing. True. But there's something missing from all of this. So this is pretty much the whole article. I'm not accidentally skipping over some parts. You know what's missing from this entire thing? The whole thing in here is about experts saying how bad this could be. It's way up here, like it's dire warnings, no context about why we should trust these experts now. It's about these anti-vaxxers, because we all need to just trust this vaccine is going to come along, just ignore all the safety data and stuff that's going along like that. We need to have this, need to communicate a little better because we're, our multi-billion-dollar project here is at risk to get all this through. Because we need the vaccine, and Dr. Fauci, everybody needs to wear masks, all that stuff. But what's missing? That's what I'm always listening for, is both what's there, what's not there. Sins of omission and commission are equivalent. They've just committed an error here in CNN. They've passed up the opportunity to ask this, which I keep pushing forward, which is the number one thing that ought to be doing. The first step of every health expert in the world, including the United States, number one, ought to be that everybody prepares their terrain of their body by taking vitamin D, eating healthily, sleeping well, and avoiding stress. That would be number one. So here's an opportunity when you're quoting people like Fauci and Redfield to ask them a question. Or any other doctor and say, yeah, I hear all about we're waiting on this vaccine and you want us to just, wash our hands and wear masks until one comes along. But what about the fact that people who have adequate levels of vitamin D in their body have a much, much better disease progression or sometimes are entirely asymptomatic compared to people who have vitamin D levels below a certain level? What about all the other things we could be doing and should be doing to make sure that our terrain of our body is absolutely as competent as it can be to fight off not just COVID-19, if we happen to come across that, but any other virus or any other disease? The United States spends almost no effort ever, and there's none I'm aware of. I've been through the whole FDA site. I've been through the CDC. There's nothing on any of those websites about the most important thing that we could do from a public policy health perspective, which is to make sure that people's immune systems are tuned up and well prepared. So how is that missing from news articles like this, which to my mind are leaning a little bit heavy on the fear? They're pushing out a dire warning and then shaming people because they might have what I consider to be legit questions about the safety of novel vaccines, like the mRNA vaccines, which are being pushed forward by Moderna and also the Pfizer candidates there. Those are mRNA vaccines. We've never had one before. Might work great, might not. We don't know. right? So at any rate, that's why I'm calling this fighting the mainstream press, because I consider this to be exceptionally bad reporting. And as well, came across another one here today, which was an article that just came out today, was an interview with Bill Gates in Bloomberg. And they asked one question here that, well, what about the conversation around hydroxychloroquine, which the White House has promoted despite its repeatedly being shown to be ineffective and, in fact, to cause heart problems in some patients? What a loaded question. First off, it's been repeatedly shown to be ineffective when you give it late. Somebody's already in the hospital. It just doesn't work out, okay? It's the same thing as like saying, well, the person crashed their car into the tree. They were all mangled. We then applied an airbag to this person while they were still all mangled in the car. And it turned out it made their circumstance worse. They actually died after we did that. We therefore conclude that they don't work. Airbags actually make things worse. Well, that's exactly what was happening with hydroxychloroquine. Every single study where they give it late, and it's an antiviral, by the way. So giving an antiviral after the virus has already peaked and now your body's fighting a cytokine storm, it doesn't help. And in fact, if you do something even more egregious and worse, in fact, criminal as far as I'm concerned, which is what the UK doctors did, they're either wildly incompetent or ridiculously horrible at their jobs, or they're just malicious. They gave toxic doses of hydroxychloroquine to severely ill patients and then said, hey, we think it made them slightly worse. Oh my God, that was just, I don't even know how to fit that in the annals of science. I think leeches are going to be resurrected well before that study comes back into favor and people say, yeah, we think we understand what they were up to there. At any rate, loaded question, repeatedly shown to be ineffective, in fact, to cause heart problems in some patients. I spent a wasted half hour Googling for hydroxychloroquine heart death, and I couldn't find it. I can't find a single case example. They didn't, not one single thing where they said, well, here's Mr. Smith, came into the hospital, was given hydroxychloroquine, had a QT prolongation that led to a torsade de pointe, and he died. None of that stuff. What I found was lots of hints that doctors said that it was, but it was all like anecdotal. So no actual data around that. Well, Bill Gates says this is an age of science, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Science is all about the data. Let's go, Bill. Tell us. In the test tube, hydroxychloroquine looked good. On the other hand, there are lots of good therapeutic drugs coming that are proven to work without the severe side effects. Severe side effects. What's a severe side effect? Death would be a severe side effect. Muscle damage that's permanent. Things like that. So you know what? Severe side effects. I'm unaware of these. So let's cover this ground again one more time. Let's see what Bill Gates is talking about. First, we're going to turn to the FDA's Adverse Event Reporting System, the AER, which is, by the way, it's not a perfect system. Anybody, including you can enter an adverse event into this system, and then it gets recorded. All right, so what we note here is that when I looked for all the adverse events associated with hydroxychloroquine diphosphate, hydroxychloroquine sulfate, or Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine, all the derivatives I could find of hydroxychloroquine, a grand total, it was associated with 575 death cases. But again, this is not it caused deaths. It means somebody somewhere recorded something and said, we had a patient death, and here's all the drugs they were on. And hydroxychloroquine might have been one of those, right? And it's associated with 19,185 severe cases. The other thing you might notice, though, is that it was pretty darn safe for many, 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 many years, and it's only lately that it's turning out to be, especially in 2020, that it's starting to have all these adverse events. And by the way, anybody, again, can enter things into the system, including, say, pharmagoons who decide that they would like to cast aspersions about this, or political operatives who would like to make Trump look bad if that's their motivation, or what anybody can, for any reason, can say that they want to put something in. So I'm not going to hold up this next data as gospel either, but let's just take a quick peek and let's compare hydroxychloroquine to my favorite, aspirin. Here's aspirin in a variety of forms right here. Associated with 14,822 death cases, 91,913 serious cases. I think you can clearly see, and by the way, it's got a pretty high count here through 2015 through 2020. I assume the system is ramping up here, but If you look at this going this way, make of it what you will, but aspirin is associated with many, many, many times more cases of serious adverse events in this system. Again, not a perfect system. But I get why this system exists. The system is out there to try and figure out if there are any drug interactions that you're not picking up through the normal safety testing. And it might be that if you run this large enough, you find out that aspirin plus hydroxychloroquine plus vodka is a bad combo. That's the kind of data that might pop up through a system like this. So I get that. But at the same time, it's very clear that as the system is operated, aspirin is way more deadly and dangerous than hydroxychloroquine. So I can make this statement. Hydroxychloroquine is safer than aspirin. Where's Bill Gates warning us about how severely bad aspirin is? He's not there at all. And so this makes me very suspicious because there aren't severe side effects associated with this. The side effects that are noted for hydroxychloroquine are actually quite mild. They include things like upset stomach and stuff like that. I mean, if you're on it for a long, long time, you could have retinal issues and other things can crop up. But again, it's still very rare to have those sorts of things come up. In fact, it was way back on April 24th, my daily update, when I was doing daily updates back then, I looked into the pre-COVID WHO on chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. And this is a huge study they did in March of 2017, looking at millions and millions and millions of doses of hydroxychloroquine. And their conclusion was, despite hundreds of millions of doses administered in the treatment of malaria, there have been no reports, zero, of sudden unexplained death associated with quinine, chloroquine, or amodiaquine, although each drug causes QT-QTC interval prolongation. Unfortunately, there are relatively few prospective studies on the electrocardiographic effects of these drugs, but that was what we had. Over many decades, millions of doses, right? Zero cases of sudden unexplained death. And the next, all of a sudden, here in 2020, we have Bill Gates opining in an expert sort of a manner about the severe side effects of hydroxychloroquine. It's just not the case. And so this is really disturbing to see this because this actually all alone disqualifies Bill Gates for me as a serious contender to listen to in this sort of thing, because he knows better than this. He's playing a different game, and I get that. But it's not okay for me let me put it, what's the simplest way? If a man who's at the forefront of pushing for a vaccine can't even properly characterize the side effects of hydroxychloroquine, why would I trust? Why would I think that they're going to do a better job at the infinitely more complicated job of creating a vaccine? If you can't get the simple stuff right, you're probably not going to get the complicated stuff right. That's just a rule I live by. All of which leads me to the Mark Twain quote. It's perfect. If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. And thank you very much for Bloomberg for helping out with that misinformation. You did an awesome job at it. And CNN, great job at misinforming us really pretty strongly here today. But you can always exceed that tomorrow, I guess. All right. That's what I got to say about the news. And now I really want to turn now for the last bit just to something that again, I don't want to this is still a disease that we've got to take very, very seriously. This virus, I'm convinced, is not a natural virus. It's got too many elements in its receptor binding domain and the polybasic furin cleavage site, which suggest that the simplest, easiest explanation for all those features showing up in this virus is that it was made in a lab. And that's a view I hold, and that's the preponderance of the data tips me to that conclusion. But if we actually can find a wild, natural reservoir of this virus out there that makes a lot of sense and we can follow the lineage of it, then I will change my mind. Why? Because that's what the data will say. Right now, preponderance of the data says bad disease. By the way, asymptomatic does not mean okay. That's a reminder I want to make right here. Unfortunately, many face long-lasting damage to many different organ systems, and we're just finding out and learning more and more about that. So let's turn now. This was a fairly interesting short clip here, just a couple of minutes. Let's, if I can get this to pop up, let's tune in.
Anybody who needed to be hospitalised or needed intensive care support will suffer disability afterwards. That there are different disease severities. And what we're studying at the moment is the patients who had mild symptoms and then the patients who had severe COVID. Anybody who has to go to ICU for a period of time, and many of them get a condition called PICS, post-intensive care syndrome. And, it's characterized by weakness. Sometimes patients need rehabilitation. Fortunately, in many cases, that syndrome is reversible. If anyone's experienced complications during their stay, they may never reach their former baseline level of functioning. I expect that there will be a reasonable burden on the kind of specialties that would look after post-infectious, post-ICU patients. So we're talking about the rehab specialists, the rehab units, the physios, OTs, social workers. Speech pathologists, we often contact patients who have breathing tubes in their vocal cords. Then they can often have hoarseness for a while and we need speech paths involved. If we're talking about even short to medium term problems, it's more economic burden on the healthcare system, resource burden. It's taking patients away from their regular roles in terms of employment and roles as carers. There's a broader economic problem which follows the health problem. Even the patients who didn't need to be hospitalised, some are still complaining of symptoms 3 or 4 months down the track. And, these symptoms can be disabling for people, especially if you're in a profession where you need to be at the top of your game physiologically. The whole aim of our study is to work out why this is happening, what the impairments are, and what patients need. It's such a novel virus. There's so much that we don't know about it. There's so much we don't know about the effects of it long term. I think this is all work in progress.
Yeah, work in progress. It is a novel virus, and this is something I've been I've been pointing out the data for a while, which is now getting beyond anecdotal. And the anecdotes before were about the long haul patients who were out there saying, geez, I've had these symptoms for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. There are people who are really doing this. I highlighted a case of the woman who had it. A number of you said, wow, she wasn't tested, positive to have COVID twice. But this is what long haul people look like. And by the way, this is pretty much falling into what we've been purporting about for a few months here, including that case of that woman out of Arizona that we reported on a while back. And so if you need your data to come from a big time newspaper or something like that, here it is in the Wall Street Journal talking about this doctor understands her long-term COVID patients. She's been one herself. And so this just came out on August 10th. Here's the doctor here writing, as head of primary care at University of California, San Francisco, Colleen Kivlahan sees up to 20 COVID patients some days in virtual appointments. Some got infected months ago, but still have persistent symptoms. She understands their experience better than most. She's lived it. Dr. Kivlahan, 67, is one of an estimated tens of thousands of so-called long-haul COVID patients. Many had cases initially considered mild or moderate, but months later they still struggle with a wide-ranging battery of symptoms that can include fatigue, chest pain, cognitive issues. Experts estimate that as many as 15% of COVID patients may experience long-term symptoms, though much remains unknown. And by the way, that 15% is a number we came up with a while ago, so I'm glad to see that's feels about right. Besides the physical toll, long-term patients face an emotional one as well. One frustration they often voice is that doctors don't believe their symptoms are real or can't understand what it's like to be sick for months with no certainty about when they might get better. I'm sure you can't understand is something Dr. Kivlahan says she often hears from new patients, but she does. When it's appropriate clinically, I tell them my story. It causes tremendous relief. People begin to believe there's hope. Well, certainly the first step in hope is being believed. And by the way, this is something a lot of people with chronic conditions, I'm a big believer in allopathic medicine for acute stuff, heart attacks, car accidents, all that. But the chronic stuff, quite honestly, allopathic medicine is that's not a strong suit. And that's where I believe other practitioners, holistic medicine practitioners, people who will take a lot of data and spend a lot of time with you and work with you on the totality of your system. That would include your sleep patterns, your eating patterns, what you're eating, taking all the blood work and everything to make sure that you have all the appropriate levels of various hormones and nutrients within your blood, things like that, right? So I'm a big believer personally, my belief system, that functional medicine gives a much better chance at treating chronic things than standard Western allopathic. And again, car accidents, other acute things like that, yeah, take me on down. I think allopathic medicine shines there. So that's where I fall on that. Dr. Kivlahan herself, her own story is she fell ill on March 6th, took a COVID diagnostic test a few days later, but came back negative. 6 days later, March 12th, she had a fever, severe shortness of breath, and terrible night sweats. She went to the emergency department and took a second COVID test, which again came back negative. Tests showed she had diffuse bronchitis as well as another rare respiratory virus. Okay, so maybe that was it. But her cough worsened, her chest and stomach hurt from the deep coughing, and at times she felt so weak she had to rest in the shower. I was short of breath just sitting there, she recalls. I had to lay down with my head down off the bed just to breathe. Well, that sounds like classic COVID here, doesn't it? When she went to the emergency room again, she got an EKG to rule out a heart attack because her chest pain was so bad. By March 21st, she felt a little better. But a second wave of symptoms came days later. Her cough returned, along with chills, chest pain, shortness of breath. The next day, she went to UCSF's respiratory screening clinic, and she finally tested positive for COVID-19. A day or two later, she noticed she could no longer smell the mint growing in her backyard or taste the hot chocolate she makes every morning. I'm a bean-to-bar chocolatier, she says. I make chocolate. I can't smell or taste it. She finished her will and advance directive for end-of-life care, worried that she would end up in the hospital on a ventilator. I packed a bag several times to go to the hospital and just decided I can make it one more night at home. Her symptoms continued in April, especially in the evening. I could not take a full breath. The pressure in my chest was so intense I had to lie very still in bed to avoid breathing deeply. She tested positive for COVID-19 again on April 8th, which was a big emotional backslide, she says. It was really the first time I felt like this is a virus we don't understand. PCR tests on April 26th and May 4th were again positive. By late May, she was starting to feel a little better, started running upstairs. Good news followed on June 8th. Antibody test came back positive, and on June 11th, a PCR test was finally negative. I celebrated by taking a walk outside with a mask on. Still, she has lingering symptoms. She still has a mild cough. She hasn't regained her sense of smell and taste. That sounds awful. Every few days, she has a strong taste and smell of fire. Smelling an odor that isn't present is known as phantosmia and can be triggered from upper respiratory infections, among other things. So that's just an example. It's from a doctor. It's in the Wall Street Journal. Hopefully we can agree that this long-hauling thing is a thing. It's a real thing. So let's hope for all the long haulers' sake that we do begin to figure out how this virus actually works, and let's hope that we can stop the spread of this so that fewer people have to go through this. Because no matter what, if we said, hey, New York isn't having 10,000 cases a day anymore, but they're down to just say 700. Well, we say just 700. What's that? That's going to be about 15% of 700 would be, well, 10% is 70. So let's call it 100. 100 people out of those 700 are going to end up with maybe being long haulers. So that's unacceptable. And, to have 100 people a day slipping into this long hauling because you have an endemic virus that's just circulating around, that's not a good thing. All right. Conclusions for today, August 13th, 2020. We still in U.S. mainstream press, sorry, let me fix that right on the spot. I was going to say something a little bit different, but I'll put it this way. Perfect. The U.S. mainstream press continues to do a horrible job of providing context and appropriate guidance here. They're failing to ask the appropriate questions. I don't know. I can't explain in any good possible terms why we're not talking about how to help people prepare their terrain so that that's the most effective, cheap, wonderful thing you can do to fight off any illness, including COVID. They're not holding the officials accountable, that's that, and they're not asking questions such as, why are you telling us to mask up and wait for a vaccine, but not even mentioning vitamin D and other terrain-boosting efforts that would be effective, rapid, and cheap? Great question. Why isn't that being asked? Kind of interesting. Bill Gates knows better than to describe HCQ as having severe side effects. So what's going on there? That's the first thing we have to ask is, and those aren't severe side effects. Those are severe side effects. All right, we have to ask, what is going on there? That just doesn't seem right. Sour note for me on that one. And we still don't understand this virus. It's got unnatural abilities to infect too many organs and systems. We're just beginning to grasp how to treat it. Long hauling is an actual thing, and that's why I still don't want to get it. With all that said, I'm really hopeful that the XYZ theory is going to bear out and that we're not going to face a second wave of this in the fall that's going to be as bad or, God forbid, even worse than the ones we've already faced. So that's what I hope the data confirms that. Let's all hope for that. All right, what do you do to boost your immune system besides good rest, avoiding anything that might give you a lot of stress, things like that? First up, quercetin, zinc, D3. This is a powerful trio right here. And of course, if you don't have selenium, you might want to have some of that in your system too. But so let's call that a powerful quadro unit right there. That's really great. And if you do happen to get ill, vitamin C, I actually take vitamin C pretty regularly anyway. It's important to have, and it's a great thing for general health of your body. And there's absolutely no harm in taking it. So do that. N-acetylcysteine, great for mopping up antioxidants. It's an antioxidant great for mopping up oxidative damaging species that might be in your body because of a cytokine storm or other insults. By the way, I mentioned this last time, and I probably should post the link to this. Looks like the FDA is targeting this and thinking about maybe taking that off the market for reasons I'm sure have nothing to do with public health and everything to do with bucks, because that's how this works. And by the way, if I do feel the tickle in my throat this cold or flu season, or if I suspect COVID or anything like that, elderberry syrup, Gobble Mountain elderberry, great stuff. Really great product there. So it works for me, not medical advice. But of course, there are great double-blind placebo-controlled trials on elderberry syrup that show remarkable efficacy against viruses. So if you want to read those, very easy to find on the intertubes. All right. Remember, if you want to take a picture of yourself in a resilience t-shirt, send that pic to info@peakprosperity.com. We'll post it to our Instagram page. And by the way, you could troll that page and see for yourself all the wonderful pictures of people usually standing in front of greenery from their gardens and doing all these wonderful things to become more resilient. It's great to see all their happy, smiling faces. So thank you, everybody who sent the pictures in. Time to harvest the garden. I got to go do some of that. I got lots of things that need picking right about now. And remember, if you do get unsubscribed, and we still get information from people pretty routinely that they are getting unsubscribed from this channel. Thanks, YouTube. Thanks, Twitter. All of that. And we know why it's happening. It's because we dare to say things like that the CDC is not doing that great of a job, and maybe we should question them. And I know that runs against the prevailing sensibilities of U.S. social media giants. But at any rate, that's how it is, and my commitment to you is that I will continue to say what I believe to be the case, regardless of whether or not that costs me subscribers and things like that from the social media giants. All that. Okay, that's it. We'll see you next Tuesday. Have a great weekend. And if you like this and you found it useful, hit the like button. Thank you very much. That helps other people find this material. All right, very good. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Hi folks, this is Adam Taggart, Chris's co-founder at Peak Prosperity. To get your own Resilient shirt, simply go to peakprosperity.com/shirts. Each shirt is made of 100% organic cotton and produced in the USA. And when your shirt arrives, please send us a photo of you wearing it if you feel comfortable doing so. We'll add you to our wall of proud Peak Prosperity members who are showing the world that resilience is the way to a better future. Thanks for watching.